Which project is it funding? Because according to our laws, project debt should only go into a project fund. But I will not speak much on it because I do. Today we have Jimmy Wanjigi, who has been very vocal on this issue. Maybe you can give him the mic to explain further on these concepts. And let me just say this. We come into this space as citizens who are concerned about the country. We are not coming into this space as politicians who are trying to campaign. And we are open to be asked any questions, to be interrogated. The information we share can be used by anybody, even in UDA, any Kenyan. Because what the Kenyan people are seeking is what will work for all Kenyans. Make Kenya work for all Kenyans. If the information comes from UDA, it will help. If the information comes from us, an ordinary citizen, it will help. The ultimate goal is to make sure that Kenya works for all Kenyans. Last time I'd said, let us not allow politicians to occupy and own this space. This is a citizen space that is meant to hold everybody accountable and to allow Kenyan people to understand and know the details of how their government is working and how their money is being utilized. If Jimmy can be allowed to speak, I will. I think Amerix can allow him, or he can speak from my. Because I'm with him, he can speak from my.
Yeah, you
The,
can
the,
speak
request, the
from your
request is
end
there.
because I'm trying to
Okay, let
look
me give him the
for
mic. He
these
can
other
speak from my
people,
end.
but I can't see them.
Okay, let me give him the. He's in, but the request has not been
Mercy,
admitted.
Mercy. I'm looking for Mercy. All right. Before we wait for Mercy, Nelson, you had a very interesting revelation. There is a JKI heist going on currently, and you are the one who blew the whistle that our airports are now being sold, or is it being leased for 30 years? Are you able to give us a brief overview of that, and what are we going to do as a country to ensure that our installation, our assets are not leased without public participation? Nelson. Hello, Nelson, can you hear me? Nelson? Hello, Nelson. Willis, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Maybe Jimmy is here. You can just proceed now.
Maybe you can introduce the topic so that we go in bits. Yes, Jimmy, welcome.
Thank you, Amerix. I'm honored to be on. Thank you for the invitation. I'm sorry I couldn't have come on earlier. As you know, I was mourning my father. But now that we are here, let me be very clear. We are a country that is governed by laws, and everything we do is within that framework. Our government, and it's important people understand this because for many people it's not basic enough. A government simply operates to mobilize resources from the citizens of Kenya so that they can be used for the needs of all the citizens of Kenya. And to mobilize those resources, it has two avenues. One is taxation, which is the primary one, and the other is debt, which is simply supposed to be a top up. That is all, a top up. In fact, if you read the Constitution carefully, it is very clear that they expect us to have what you call a balanced budget, that we live within our means, the resources we're able to mobilize. Now, our 2010 Constitution and subsequent PFM, Public Finance Management Act, anchored what you call financial controls on our resources. Those financial controls embedded in the Constitution, embedded in PFM, are law. In other words, you are not supposed to breach those provisions. But what happened from 2013 when the law became active? This is where we say, because we have bothered to do, I believe, the first forensic audit on our public debt. This is when the rain started beating us. This is when the biggest fraud on the people of Kenya occurred. And if you don't mind, I would like to explain this in detail. One thing my late father taught me a long time ago is that to be a leader or to be able to talk to people, you must be able to teach. People must learn. When they learn, they grow in their knowledge and their scrutiny. So we bothered to commission an audit on our public debt. And this audit is called a forensic audit. A forensic audit is an audit that looks at fraud. Is there been any avenue that the law has not been followed in the procurement of our public debt? So when the president the other day said he's got a forensic audit team, or task force as he called it, the first thing I looked at is on all those appointees, there's no forensic auditor at all. A forensic auditor is a very different breed from just a simple auditor. These are licensed people. And we bothered to get what was the foremost forensic auditor in Kenya, a man called Bernard Muchere, who had done a lot of internal audit for government for the last 41 years. He headed the team, and within, let's say, about 4 to 5 months, he had completed the entire job. These records are public, so there was nothing that was hidden. So what happens is that our laws anchor this debt. It says, for example, that debt must be on the budget. Number one, it says that debt in the medium to long term should only be taken for development. Number two, it says that you cannot borrow for recurrent expenditure. In other words, to pay salaries, or if people want to get on a jet plane to fly off to America, you can't pay for that. You can't pay for any other expenditure other than development. And then it says, number three, that if you want to borrow because you have cash flow problems, you can, but it must be within 1 year, and it must be paid within that 1 year. And on top of that, it gives a maximum, a ceiling. And the ceiling says this: it cannot be 5% more, it can only be a maximum of 5% of the total tax revenue, audited tax revenue returns of the previous financial year. So if you collected 2 trillion in tax revenue, then 5% means that you cannot take more than 100 billion. It also goes further to say that that is expected to be an overdraft at CBK. Now, that is the basis of our laws. One other provision I might like to say is what is called Article 214. Article 214 says there is the consolidated fund where all our revenue must be put in. So whether it's tax revenue, whether it is debt revenue, it must be put in one simple fund called the consolidated fund, one account, nothing else. So where did the rain start beating us? In 2013, the Uhuru Ruto government went to the parliament and they proposed an amendment number one to the Consolidated Fund, an amendment through the Public Finance Management Act, that you amend the Constitution, Article 214, through the Public Finance Management Act, which, as you and I know, is an illegality. You cannot amend the Constitution through an act. And they added two more provisions that were not in the Constitution, saying that money, in essence, do not have to enter the consolidated fund. That was the first. The second is that they introduced something called supplementary budget number two. Supplementary budget number two was another foundation of fraud. If you read the provisions in the Constitution on a supplementary budget, first it is an addition to the budget that has been passed by the end of June that year. So it is just supplementing the items there, and there is a maximum that the addition cannot be more than 10%. Now, that means that there's a ministry, for example, that is building a road, and they find that it was 100 shillings, and the cost has gone up to 110, so they ask for the 10 more. But it is already in the budget, 100 shillings. Now, here, in supplementary two, they suddenly decided they're introducing something called a new budget with the new projects that were not in the previous budget passed in the appropriations of that June. So this is where the fraud began. Now, the fraud began with those two. So money started being borrowed that were not on the budget. Money started going into accounts that were not the consolidated fund. And our summary is simply this. And I'll give you a summary from July 2013 all the way to June 2023. 10 years. Remember, I said debt is a top up, it is not a principle. So we said, let us look at the accounts of government. What is the government expenditure? How much did the government put on the budget for development? It was 6 trillion shillings. How much did they put for the counties? We put the figure. How much are their salaries over those 10 years? We put the figure. How much were their operations expenses? We put the figure. How much were their pensions? We put the figure. One item we removed, because this is what is called a primary balance, we removed one item called any debt payments. So we found a figure of 14.6 trillion. We said, very good. That's the sum total of 10 years. Fantastic. So how much income did we get? How much, how much was KRA stating that they got? All right? So KRA, we did their actuals, not estimates. It's simple math. We calculated simple math, and that figure over that period was 13.3 trillion. So we had what you call a shortage of only 1.3 trillion. 1.3 trillion was the only item that was needed for a budget, for all those budgets of 10 years. That is the top up that was required. That is what many economists like to call the deficit. Nice, simple, clean, 1.3 trillion. So we said, okay, how much did we borrow? We borrowed, Eric, to your shock, a figure of 7.7 trillion over the same period. In other words, if you do the subtraction of 1.3, 6.4 trillion more than we needed, more than was on any budget that had been put forward, more than any approval from Parliament, because Parliament approves a budget where the debt is anchored. That means that that 6.4 did not go to anything for the sovereign called the Kenyan. It is simply a heist. But we didn't stop there. We went on and we said, in the same period, how much money was allocated to debt payments? How much of our taxes, the ones that Kenyans sweat to pay, went towards our debt payments? Our figures had ended because we had done July up to July 2022. We found we had paid 5.6 trillion. To June 2023, we added another 1.4. So there you have 7 trillion. Then this last financial year that has just passed with the controversial bill that you're seeing people rejected, this last financial year, we paid another 1.8. So that is 9.8 trillion we have paid for debt payments, right? We overborrowed by 6.4. Okay. What are we being asked for today? The figure is 11 trillion. This figure does not come down. When we did our audit in 2022, it was 8.5. Today, it's going to 11 trillion. You now balance it between how much, what the dollar exchange rate is. This is a phenomena that we cannot deal with. This is a grievous fraud, and we are never meant to pay it. It is our chain, it is our slavery. And let me put that slavery in context as to the debt that has been taken. Two things I want to say. Our biggest problem is that you must understand that debt is tax in advance. Our taxes have to pay it. So you go back to our history, even before we had these great laws in the Constitution and PFM, Public Finance Management. When Moi handed over the economy of Kenya to Mwai Kibaki, Moi was collecting 170 billion in tax revenue. And he was paying, of every 100 shillings of that tax revenue, 28 shillings towards debt payment. He had in 1995 appealed to donors, in other words, the creditors, at a group called the Paris Club, and had gotten softer repayment terms. He was paying 28. He had rescheduled his debt. He was paying 28 shillings of every 100 to debt. So Kibaki takes economy and he hands it over to Uhuru in 2013. And at that point, Kibaki has taken revenue to 1 trillion shillings, just under. Just under. And you know how much he was paying to debt of every 100? 18 shillings of every 100 shillings was going to debt payment. So he had brought it down. Great. We had seen the modernization of Kenya because Kibaki is the father of Kenya's modern age. In 2022, Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, but I must say Uhuru and Ruto were in the same government, hands over to Ruto. And at that point, revenue had gone to something like 2.1 trillion, double. But 70 shillings of every 100 was going to debt. Today, as we are talking, 80 shillings, just under 80 shillings of every 100 of tax revenue we sweat and contribute goes towards the payment of one item called debt. So you can understand why he wants to come and tax us more and do everything he can, because we are at that state where you have just a manager who is simply just receiving money and paying debt. He's not managing any other affair. That is the critical nature we are in.
Wait, Jimmy. What did you say? I had something 80, 100, something. Can you repeat it so that it gets deeper
Let me
into our
repeat
own
it.
marrow?
Yes. Let me repeat it. Eric, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Let me repeat.
We lost you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Just repeat
Okay.
that bit of 80, 80, 100, something.
Yeah. I will come back.
How are our taxes being used? One person in his own personal account having 7.4 billion. 7.4 billion. You go up to Bungoma, where I come from, where poverty is the order of the day. 100 million is siphoned from Bungoma. What are you saying? What are you saying? What is he saying?
Yes, go on. What are you saying? Hello, Jimmy. We lost you. Mercy, I can see you here. How are you, Mercy?
Can you hear me?
Just hold on, Jimmy. Mercy?
Can you hear me, Amerix?
Just
Amerix,
hold
can
on
you
a
hear
bit,
me?
Jimmy. We lost you. Mercy, can you hear
Okay.
me? Mercy?
We can hear you.
Yes, go on, go on, go on. Can you tell us what happened? Why? Because we say debt, the debt problem is because of the political class. And the political class begin this problem by hoodwinking the people down there, the rural people, the voters. They con and steal from them. Then they graduate from the rural voters to the treasury. Can you please tell us, Mercy, what happened down there in Wasinigishu? Mercy. Mercy, is there a problem from your side? Mercy?
Eric, shall I continue? Can you hear me?
Okay, go on, go on, go on. A lot of
Yeah.
confusion everywhere. Go
Sorry,
on.
Eric. Sorry, Eric. I was saying, you asked me to repeat that for what is this about every 100? So what has happened is that when Moi handed over the economy of Kenya to Kibaki, he handed over a revenue base of taxation of 170 billion. That's the amount of tax Moi was collecting. And of every 100 shillings of that debt, he was paying 28 of every 100 towards the payment of debt. When Kibaki handed over his economy to Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, he was collecting 1 trillion. He had taken revenue tax collection to 1 trillion from 170 by widening the economic base of Kenya, removing barriers to our growth. And of every 100 shillings of tax revenue, he was paying 18 shillings towards the payment of debt. Remember, debt is tax in advance. When Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta handed over to William Ruto, but I like to repeat that they were in the same government together, revenue, tax revenue had gone to 2.1 trillion. But for every 100 shillings of that tax revenue, 70 shillings was going to one item called debt payments. Today, the end of the financial year 2023-2024, which ended June 30th, the calculations are the following: that for every 100 shillings, tax return revenue has gone to 2.4, but for every 100 shillings of that 2.4, 80 shillings, just under 80 shillings, is going towards the payment of debt. We are in an ICU situation. And unfortunately, as I said earlier, this debt did not come to us. It was never for our benefit. It is contrary to our laws, and we cannot and should not pay it. We should call it what it is, a fraud on the Kenyan people. And that fraud is leading to our strangulation and our enslavement, because this fraud continues for the next 10 years, unabatedly increasing. These debt payments do not decrease. We paid 1.8 this last financial year. We are paying a similar amount, probably even more, because I'm sure the dollar will not remain where it is. Then this coming financial year, it's going to be more in 2026. It will be horrific. This is why we are in the problems we are facing. And I want to explain this debt in terms of its composition. When Moi was rescheduling his debt, he was only dealing with one party called the Paris Club. That is where you have the bilateral donors. You have IMF, you have World Bank, you have what you call the bilateral agreements with, the Western world. Today, we have a Madrid. We have 4 pockets. We have the bilateral Paris Club. We have the Chinese debt. We have something else called the London Club. The London Club debts are the Eurobonds you've been hearing about, are the so-called syndicated loans from these Western banks that are really commercial loans. And then you have the fourth, which is called domestic debt. These bonds and bills people keep subscribing to every so often. a fraud beyond your imagination. These are the 4 pockets. And I can tell you today.
Okay, Jimmy.
Yes.
Okay, Jimmy. Hold on a bit.
Yes.
Mercy, it's you I'm looking for. Mercy, go on. Your mic is on. Go ahead and speak. Mercy.
Mercy, can you hear me?
Mercy? All right. Let me go to Nelson. Nelson, there's that JKIA hist that you have unraveled. Could you please give us a 2-3 minutes overview of the entire hist and the entire theft?
Yes, thank you, Amerix. So over the past few days, I've been going through some documents from KAA, and it's very unfortunate that these things are happening without public participation, and it's in line with what Jimmy Wanjigi is saying, that the people in power right now are just concentrated on how they will enrich themselves and amass as much wealth from our own money and from the debts. And if you look at this deal, okay, let me start from the beginning. So,
Hello. Thank you so much for hosting us. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Mercy, we can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us? Mercy, can you hear me? Okay.
All right. So thank you so much all for showing up. Thank you so much for hosting us. I'm going to start my presentation with a story. This story is about Chelangat Mutai. Then I will talk about the Finland scandal and the fertilizer scandal together with the bad seeds. Chelangat Mutai was when he was the vice president and the board chair of Highlands Girls High School, which is now Moi Girls High School. Why? For speaking truth to power. Chelangat Mutai did exams from outside, passed, and went to UN. Chelangat Mutai would write articles for the UN magazine that also spoke truth to power. There was a time that UN had a strike, and UN attributed some of her articles to a strike that took place. Chelangat Mutai was expelled again and went back to the village, where she started to teach. Chelangat Mutai got a scholarship to go to Harvard through a professor who was at UN. The only thing that they needed from her was a passport. She had accommodation, she had transport, she had everything. But now when it got to the passports, this is where the problem started. Moi declined to give Chelangat Mutai a passport. Instead, he took her file and he put it away and said that she's not going to get a passport. So they sent very many people to go and talk to him, her uncle who was in the military, her relatives, but he refused. And now this started her career. How? Because kama mumekata atoke Kenya, she decided she was going to make Kenya work for her. That is how she became the first woman, first Kalenjin woman, and the youngest member of parliament in Kenya. The Uasin Gishu Finland-Canada scandal. I'm not going to talk about myself or any of the students. Today, I will talk about 4 parents, only 4 out of 379 parents. Number 1 is Guka. If you listened to me, ile siku nikiongea, niliuliza those leaders, nikawauliza, nyinyi mumesema tukuje meeting hii time. Mumefika saa ngapi? Guka hapa hajakula. The Guka that I was talking about was 75 years old at the time. He lost 1.2 million to this scandal. How? He had a grandson. Aka decide now, okay, now I cannot give you this land because this land is by the time in Africa, when you need to help yourself, it is not going to be enough. So what am I going to do? This is your inheritance. But because unataka kwenda kusoma, what I am going to do is I am going to sell this land so that I pay for you school fees, you go. So he sold the inheritance of the grandson. Then these people, he was very vocal in the beginning, very, very vocal. He would talk about it, he would come for meetings, and then all of a sudden, he would not show up. You would go look for him and he would just be silent na anawaambia nyinyi mtulie tu, watawalipa tu, msijali. And so you wonder, what did these guys do to Buka so that he does not want to speak? Because he was not paid. We asked him, were you paid? He said, I was not paid. There's a widow who had her firstborn in this scandal. Again, she paid 1.2 million. And she got this money by selling her property. She sold her plot with her house inside it, inside the plot. So she sold, aliuza nyumba na kauza plot yake. Siku hizi wanaishi kwa rentals. So that huyu mtoto akitoka hapa akuje asaidie siblings wake waone venye make, yani watajisaidia tu in this life. Now they are living in a rental house. Unaweza imagine majirani wakipita what they say, because first of all she is a woman, secondly yeye ni widow, third sahi aliuza shamba yao, sasa sahi wako kwa rent. Can you imagine the shame first of all, and then the mental torture that huyu mzazi ana go through? You have sold everything, wewe na mtoto wako mnakaa hapo kwa nyumba mnaangaliana, mnashangaa tutafanya nini? There's no, when you ask these people, they wanauliza wewe ulipea Mandago pesa yako ama ulipea Chelili ama ulipea nani? And you know very well ulilipa kwa county. There's a widower who had 3 kids. He lost 4.2 million to this. 4.2. He sold his 5 acres of land. Na kama wewe unatoka Shags, ata anyone knows how land is so precious. Very precious. Akauza 5 acres. Na tulikuwa tumepewa 2 weeks. 2 weeks mkuwe mmeleta pesa, kama hujaleta pesa unakuwa disqualified. So this man, he's a widower, he has raised his 3 daughters. Ameenda ameuza shamba yake in 14 days. So that means hiyo shamba imeenda at a throwaway price, because you cannot get a buyer in that span of time mwenye atanunua na that amount, like the right amount of money. So he lost 4.2 million. Tulienda mkutano, the last meeting alikuja, tulikuwa na Chelili, Mbarorot na Mandago, na akawaambia mimi nimelipa pesa zangu, niliuza shamba, na akasema niliuza shamba zangu eka 5 nikalipa 4.2 million. Sahi sina mahali pa kuenda, sasa wacha nirudi nyumbani, nikifika huko nikae tu, mtakuja mnizike. The worst thing is that this man would not have found out about this because anatoka uko ndani, ziwa ndani. He would never have found out about this kama these leaders hawangeenda kwa grassroots levels during burials, wedding ceremonies, na kuambia watu, you know what guys, we have this program that is taking people abroad. So he sold his 5 acres. You can imagine. And now when he asks again, anaulizwa wewe ulipea pesa yako nani? Lastly, I will talk about a parent with 2 kids. This man lost 2.5 million Kenya shillings. He had 2 daughters in this scandal. He paid 2.5 million to the same account. Then this thing, pesa ikapotea. Mpaka sahi bado sisi wote, everyone mwenye alikuwa kwa hii kitu ako Kenya. Ilibidi ametoka Wasingishu kwa sababu this was his pension. Ilikuwa mpango yake. Alikuwa amejiambia, unajua niko na watoto, nikilipia watoto hizi pesa wanaweza jisaidia kimaisha, waone kenye watafanya, waende wasome, maybe in 1 year 2 years wanaweza rudi Kenya wanisaidie. So hivyo Sahi wote wako nyumbani. Imebidi atoke Uasin Gishu ameenda Baringo. Kufanya nini? Farming. Farming gani? Ya nyanya. All of us know, if you're a farmer unajua, how farming ya nyanya ni very, yani inahitaji so much care. It is not like maize where you just plant and then you leave, you go. This is tomatoes which require you to stay hapo the whole season. Huyu mtu ametoka civilization ameenda uko in the middle of nowhere. Why? Again to start over. A 65-year-old man trying to start over, aone venye atajisaidia kimaisha. Wamechukua hizi pesa na sahii tena mkienda kuuliza, wanauliza wewe ulipea Chelili pesa, ulipea Mandago pesa, ulipea Barorot pesa, ulipea nani? But
Okay.
That is what your government can do for you.
All right, Mercy. Just
so nyinyi mnawapea pesa and then au wana decide mmetupea pesa, sasa let us put it into better use.
Right.
So mbona mna complain na nyinyi mko ndani ya serikali? Si huyu ni mtu wenu mwenye anawatakia mema. Si mumempea pesa, si mumpe time aende put your money into better use. Why are you hurrying? Why are you disturbing
Just
people?
hold on, Mercy.
Why can't you wait? We put your money into better use and then decide that we are going to now pay for you school fees if we want, or maybe refund.
All right.
Then they will ask you, why are you fighting a government that is working? Because see, the government is working. Everyone can see. You pay your money, the government works for you. It takes your money, it puts it into better use. And then now what you have to do is wait. Wait so that you can see the fruits of this labor.
All right.
Sasa juzi, they have decided.
All right,
because
Mercy. Hold on there.
I don't want a job. I do not want a job.
Hold on
The
there,
thing
Mercy.
that ilileta all of this is I was supposed to go to school. So why do you want to give me a job when ningekuwa nimeenda kusoma? Now they have seen they cannot get to me. So they start using proxies. You start talking to my family and start telling them, kwani huyu mtoto ameulizia appointment akanyimwa? Ameulizia dialogue akanyimwa? Ameapproach nani akakataa kumpea kazi? Huyu mtoto anataka kuenda kufanya kazi wapi? Mbona tunaongelea kazi ya mtu mmoja na kuna 379 others who are suffering, who have sold their land, who have sold their property penye wanaishi.
All right, Mercy. Hold there.
But that is your government for
you. She can't hear me well. Let me bring in Francis. Gaido, what is your comment on all these issues of politicians stealing money, stealing loans, looting money all over? What do you think is the way forward here? What are we going to do as citizens? Because we cannot keep on talking, tweeting, writing, posting. We need action. We need to take action.
We need to take action. Amerix, we are tired of this bullshit. We are tired of the garbage we are seeing everywhere. So let me tell you something weird I observed today. So after the Trump assassination attempt, then immediately I saw Elon Musk. Elon Musk said that he has endorsed Donald Trump for the presidency in light of the happenings of today. Now, I was like, can you imagine if a businessman in Kenya tried endorsing a candidate for president, what would happen? We have seen the repercussions. We have seen everything that happens in Kenya when you align with one individual or presidential candidate. It's become so bad that if you are involved in politics, you are socially and economically isolated. We saw during especially Uhuru's presidency, which was very vindictive, very toxic, Uhuru ensured that everyone was below him because he wanted to remain as the alpha and omega. And so we have to anchor our economic policies to transcend individual or personal party loyalties and whatever, so that we don't have a situation where we have one singular individual whose only ambition in life is to ensuring everyone else falls so that he can remain on top. that was one thing I noticed. I was just trying to juxtapose what was happening there to here. But then we come to why we are in the situation we are in, who is influencing our policies, who is deliberately crafting our downfall, who is making sure that we remain poor, we remain an oppressed people. Number one, I can always say it's the opportunists, the people who have profited from our misery, our collective misery. Is number one is the foreigners. Personally, I like calling them, please pardon me for my French, I like calling them Muzungu pieces of shit, not the entire race, but the ones who are narcissistic enough to be able or to craft the ideology that only them should prosper and the rest should be below them. So we've been talking about capital flight, and one of our biggest problem in Kenya is that, and they have hoodwinked us. For instance, I started hearing of something called the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, since the 80s and then or the 90s and the 2000s, and they made it look like access for our products to the American market is a privilege. Yet we are good designers, yet we have the raw material, yet we have the expertise to, for instance, when you go to America, you go to one of the Woolworths or whatever stores, you go Walmart, I don't think they have Woolworths, but you go to Walmart and whatnot, you're going to see jeans, you're going to see clothes which are written made in Kenya. So they've been made in our EPZ factories here in Athi River and whatnot. And they go there just to be labeled, just to be put a brand, if it's Levi Strauss and whatnot, and yet the same can get into the local market. But then they erect entry barriers. They erect entry barriers for even local entrepreneurs, so that our products, which are made with our cotton and with our labor and with our resources, can access a foreign market. And we cannot get the same quality here. So it's almost like we are beneath them. It's almost like it's been institutionalized. It's almost like the bureaucratic pieces of shit who work in KRA, who work in Treasury, are conspiring with these foreigners to ensure that we remain as oppressed people. You look at our coffee. Our coffee is diminishing in our production, but the best of our coffee is taken outside the country. And then they go and take just a fraction of it, 10%, and then they mix it with 90% of Brazilian coffee, and then it is imported here as Nescafe, and you idiots are here, you are celebrating that you're drinking coffee, yet it is 10% of the same coffee that your parents and grandparents are growing in their farms. You understand? So we've been deliberately put in this state, and then they come and scaremonger you and tell you, build and fashion all these narratives about stability and economic prosperity, but it is them who are prosperous. Us, we are remaining here consuming third-rate products while we have the capacity to build. And one thing we should be focusing on is domestic consumption, value addition, so that when we are exporting something, we are not exporting to a go down in Dubai so that it can be value added and packed and branded. We can do all of that here and create those jobs so that we sell to these Muzungu pieces of shit at the same value, at the same marked up value that they would buy from somebody else. And that is what farmers in Latin America are doing. So it is, and that contempt continues spreading to how we approach our immigration. For instance, in Kenya, any foreigner can land in JKIA and get a visa on arrival. But us, we go to the US Embassy, you are queued there. They make us go through hoops. They take our application fees. They don't even refund. Which is why I was saying the other place we should be occupying is occupying US Embassy. Because how do they charge $200 for an application where they already have a quota where they know we are going to allow these ones? They already have a quota. So today they say we are only allowing 20 or 30. So everyone there, you are just going as a formality because they have pre-decided and predetermined who is going to get a visa and who is not going to. And then we have seen this Meg Whitman. She has insinuated herself so much in our policy making. She's taking selfies. She's doing a lot of PDA with Ruto. And I'm saying, who the fuck does she think she is? She's just a mere diplomat brought here to serve a purpose. She's supposed to be neutral. She is not even hiding that she's pro this faction of the political divide. She doesn't care about Kenyans. She's here serving commercial interests. And we as Kenyans are supposed to clap for her because she, Ruto held an umbrella for her. That is the highest form of contempt. We are here because of colonialism. These are the offshoots of colonialism in the 60s and the 70s, and we still find ourselves in the age of the Aquarius. We are still complying with such nonsensical PR stunts. So if we are saying occupy everywhere, we also include occupy US Embassy, because number one, they have enabled this rogue regime. They have facilitated all these things you're seeing, the murders and the genocide and the massacres in Githurai and Rongai. But over and above that, they have implemented, because we have a weak Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they have implemented some immigration policy where Kenyans are made to feel as if we are going to beg for visas. You should make those decisions earlier, so that if you're not going to give somebody a visa, you're going to refund 75% of the educational of the applicational fees. And I think everyone, we are on board with that. I'm going to touch on something about education. We are where we are because, number one, of our media is very toxic. You have seen how they tried to suppress the numbers of the people in Kware, in Mukuru kwa Jenga. They were lying blatantly. Linus Kaikai, shame on you if you're listening. You're full of shit, you journalists. Journalists should not be allowed anywhere where we are doing our protests or doing our activities. Because if you're going to get the real information from the people and then you go and alter it because you've been paid by State House, then we should not allow you to be there. So journalists are one part of the problem. Number two, we have religion. And number three, we have the educational curriculum. We've been talking about something called the quota system. I've been speaking about it severally. So during the Moi era, they came up, and during 844, they came up with something called the quota system, where now they select, it's almost like they sieve, it's almost like they cherry pick the best brains, which will go to some certain schools which have better facilities than the others. But if you look, and Jimmy was talking about the amount of money that has, we've been expending in the name of debt. We've been collecting. Now this year they've collected 2 trillion in taxes. They are going to borrow another probably 2 to 3 trillion in in loans. But we are not seeing anything on the ground. The counties are not building anything. So the quota system, and there is this misconception that the government built Alliance School or the government built Mangu High School. No, the schools were started and they were donated by colonialists. They were donated by the colonialists because they had grabbed our land. Now they wanted to make some concessions to hoodwink the people who are stupid by then, to be hoodwinked with a church. It was always the Holy Trinity. So there was always a church, a school, and a hospital. So they hoodwink you with that. They give you that trilogy. And so the land was what was donated, and then they mostly donated it to the church. But the parents who took their children there were always charged a development fee, and that development fee was in every fee structure. And that is what was used to build the schools. Over and above that, there used to be harambes. So there is nobody who can claim that the government has ever built any school. But why do we find ourselves with this so-called capitation? And again, I repeat that you idiots who are saying that Matiang'i should be president, you need to understand that they allocated hundreds of billions of shillings over 10 years to go to capitation, money that should have gone to build schools instead. So that instead of converting social amenities like halls into or dining rooms or whatever, instead of converting them into boarding facilities, then we would have expanded the educational facilities and educational access. I give you another example. There's this saying that the closest school is the best school. So instead of having a boarding school where I saw there's a lady called Karibi who sings, and her son got an accident when he was leaving Chavakali coming back to Nairobi. Why are we subjecting students to these long journeys to go to school? What we should be doing, the closest school is the best school. Like now Nairobi, all the schools were amazing if you look at Upper Hill and whatever, but because subsequent boards, subsequent management mismanagement. Subsequent counties neglected them. So the schools have reduced and fallen in stature and in their quality of education they provide, but they were high-end schools if you look at them today. But even Kibera Olympic, it used to lead in the KCPE results. So what we need is not now to come up with more entry barriers under the guise of quota system and whatnot. Every county, every CDF, every constituency receives no less than 110 million per year. The cost of building a school is 10 million. Why are we all cramming? We are chasing all of us to go to Mangu, to go to Alliance, to go to where, while we should be concentrating on the amount of money that is stolen in the grassroots. You understand? It's the same thing with hospitals. The cost of building a referral hospital, KU, which was the last one, was 10 billion Kenya shillings. Why is everyone rushing to Nairobi to KNH while these governors are just blowing a lot of money? We already have the numbers. Thankfully, because of the likes of Jimmy Wanjigi, we've been able. I knew there was corruption. Trust me, 2 years ago, I knew there was corruption. I knew they used to steal money. I just never put it into context, the level at which the theft is perpetrated by the political class, until I saw the actual numbers. So this is real. We are speaking about people who are repatriating our money, stashing it into foreign accounts. I was contacted by a group who said that they are the people who are behind Ruto not addressing the Congress, and they said now they are mapping all the bank accounts, foreign bank accounts that are stashing Kenyan proceeds of crime. Those are the same people you celebrate in the country. Those are the same people who you love and adore and whatever. So back to the illusion of national schools is that we now need to have national schools in every county. We've already identified that it costs 10 to 20 million to build a functional school with every facility. Then we abolish boarding school. Boarding school absorbs a lot of resources from parents because they have to invest in bed, they have to invest in uniforms, they have to invest in what? And sleep is not a productive activity. So that we lay more emphasis. First of all, we expunge religion from the curriculum. We remove the churches from managing schools so that they are run by professional boards. We lay more emphasis on sciences, on science, on technology, on agriculture, on sports and arts, so that we can create now so that we cannot have like 100% of our graduates, all of them aspiring to do business administration or to do what? No, we have artists, we have musicians, we have agronomists, we have everything. We have even vocational training. Now there is a shortage of, you get somebody to be an electrician for you. They are meeting you with a lot of shoddy work because they haven't perfected the art, and it has to start not just in high school but in primary school. But we've been bogging kids to do a lot of homework, carry big bags, waking them up, I don't know, at 5 a.m. to go to school. That is to learn important subjects which will not even be relevant in their careers in the future, while they should start. If somebody is good in sports, if somebody is good in music, if somebody is good in being an electrician or whatnot, they should start in primary school so that they start perfecting the craft earlier in life. So that is one of the... And then the church has captured, especially our politicians, because our politicians now love masses when they go and address masses, and then it comes on TV, and then they feel they stroke their bloated egos after saying absolutely nothing. So the church can be there, as an oversight. And then religion should be a mandatory undertaking in every school. If a kid feels they are Christian, nobody should block them. If there's a Muslim, there should be all those facilities in every school. But they should not be driving policy. They should not be adding students to their mental impotence. We have seen the position they have taken in our political dynamics today. We don't trust them. We no longer listen to them because they have shown us that given an opportunity, they will be always inclined to identifying and gravitating towards thugs and thieves like William Ruto and Rigathi Gachagua and whatnot. So we remove them from the educational establishment, and let's start investing in our youth so that... Okay. Sorry, Amerix, how much longer?
1 minute.
1 minute. Okay. So we expand expunged religion from the curriculum, because this CBC was an imposition of Fred Matiang'i and Uhuru and God knows who else. We don't know when it was, whether there was public participation, but even if there was, we have come to understand that public participation in Kenya is a formality, is just done, for the cameras. But now let's be intentional. And even as we are talking about overhauling the political and economic structure, let every sectoral, every sector contribute in a way. You already know the challenges that affect you in your, whether it's in industry, whether it's in agriculture, so that we have one harmonized document to overhaul our economic blueprint, so that we build a new one, we anchor it to the constitution, so that in future, one president cannot wake up and say, oh, because I hate Jimmy Wanjigi, I used to love him, he's my friend, let me go rock up to his house and raid him when his family is there. We don't want to see such scenes again, and they will only be a figment of our imagination. They will only be a distant past if our reforms are intentional, if they are deliberate, and if they are forthright, and if we are all committed to the same particular process. Thank you very much, Amerix, for having me.
Thank you very much, Francis. Let me go back to Jimmy. Jimmy, can we continue with the discussion again about
Yes,
the
sir.
debt? You were talking about the four levels of debt in this country.
Yes, Amerix, I'm glad to be back. I was saying that we have what you call 4 pockets of debt. And the 4 pockets are described this way. The Paris Club pocket. This Paris Club pocket is the pocket that has the Bretton Woods institutions, IMF, World Bank, and a lot of the Western bilateral agreements. We have another, which is called the London Club debt. The London Club debt is where you have Euro bond, and you have syndicated loans. Very expensive debt. Then you have the Chinese debt. Some of it, most of it, very kosher, but there's been some malfeasance, which I'll explain shortly. It's very soft, but I'll tell you of something that was glaringly a big fraud on Kenyans. And the last pocket is what you call domestic debt. Now, remember what I said earlier, that in what is called the medium to long term, our law is very clear. You can only borrow for development. Only borrow for development. So you'll find in the bilateral, what you call the Paris Club debt, the bilateral ones, you'll find them on the budget. You'll find line items. For example, USAID is funding a bridge in Lamu, for example. Or British aid is funding something in education. Or there is a road being built by the Italians, and it's on the budget. It is always in what you call the appropriations bill. The appropriations bill is basically the budget according to our laws. Now, you'll find that. You'll find there is support for IMF and World Bank in the budget. It is there. Some budget is support going to line items, what are called vote items in the budget. Some of this IMF money I'll come to later, we are questioning what it's about because it is not in the budget. Now, you come to what you call this new pocket that was introduced over the last 10 years or so, called the London Club pocket. Kibaki took a small portion of it as he was exiting, but it was really perpetuated under this regime of Uhuru. That pocket of London Club is very expensive commercial money, more or less commercial money. It comes from private investors. Eurobond comes from private investors looking for where they can put their money, right, and earn a good interest rate. So the interest rate was taken for our first Eurobond of 2 billion was about 6 or 7%, but it has gone up. Now, Eurobonds that the Uhuru Ruto government took was 7 billion. They've also taken a similar amount under syndicated loans, 7 billion. And I can tell you today that none of that money, because it is long term, it is beyond 1 year, none of that money, you're talking about $15 billion, appears anywhere in our budget. It funds not one project, It does not even, we don't even have it as appearing in the consolidated fund. It does not fund one item on the budget. That is your London Club pocket, and it is very expensive. Then you have the Chinese debt. The Chinese debt, most of it is anchored in our budget. It is very clearly stipulated what projects they're supporting. Right? If we are doing a road, if we are doing SGR, it has been there. But SGR has been a fraud of monumental proportions. And I'll simply put it this way, just to give you an example. Just to give you an example. I'm very familiar with this project called SGR. Very familiar. I initiated that project under the Kibaki regime. In fact, it was under the coalition agreement of Kibaki and Raila. We started that project in 2008, and that project was simply a private project. It had no government money. We wanted to do a private feasibility study because a company called RVR had failed. And we wanted to do private investment of a line from Mombasa all the way to Malaba. Right? Simply a private investment, no taxpayers' money. Our costing out of our feasibility study and our technical study came to 55 billion shillings, all the way from Mombasa to Malaba. I suddenly saw an amount of just Mombasa to Nairobi, somebody parachuting a project that had become government under the Uhuru government of 380 billion, just Mombasa to Nairobi. That project from Mombasa to Naivasha costed for what were called the original construction plus rolling stock amounted to 500 billion shillings. So just to give you a summary. So the cost of the project is 500 billion. Chinese Exim Bank, that's the Chinese debt, say we are going to loan the Kenya government a total of 90% of that money. So Kenyans, you must raise 10%. 10% of 500 is 50 billion shillings. So us from our hard-earned taxes must pay 10% before they pay the 90%. So we did an audit of these amounts. It's part of our debt audit. We did an audit. What happened? Did the Chinese give us all the money that they said? Yes, they did. They gave all the money. It was paid directly to China Road and Bridge Company, the 90%. So did Kenyans raise the 50 billion, which was 10% of 500, right? And did they contribute their share of 10%? We did the sums. Now, on the loan part, I want you to remember we are servicing that loan at very expensive rates. In fact, this coming month, there's a big bill coming up. Now, did we raise the 50 billion to as our contribution of 10%? So we did the numbers, right? And it's called Self-Raising Finance, SGR grant from the Treasury. So 50 billion was supposed to move from Treasury to Kenya Railways and then to the contractor called China Road and Bridge. So we just did the math. Eric, it was not 50 billion that was paid. It was 644 billion shillings that came out of the Treasury to go to Kenya Railways, to then go to China Road and Bridge as self-raising finance for a project worth 500 billion. So we paid for it with our own money and even more. And yet we took a loan and we are paying back that loan. China Road and Bridge for the building of SGR from Mombasa to Naivasha was paid a total of almost 1.2 trillion for a project of 500 billion, according to the contract documents. So 700 billion above what was required. That is a frightening fact. Then you come to something called domestic debt. What you hear, bonds and bills taken from our local banks, insurance companies, pension funds. This amount of the total debt we're talking about, almost 11 trillion, today stands at 5.1 trillion. 800 from our pension funds, 700 from insurance companies, the rest from banks. In other words, it's our deposits, the Kenyans' deposits in our banks, that the banks have decided to take to the treasury, loan to the treasury, and then our taxes pay them their huge interest rates. So you can see where you see some bank CEOs earning humongous amounts of bonuses and all sorts of amounts like 400 million shillings a year. This is why our money going to our government and our taxes paying for all these banks to make humongous profits at our expense. You and I try and borrow, we are told to borrow at 25%. They are loaning to the government at 16%. It is a monumental fraud because, again, there is nowhere in our appropriations bills revenue that you can say this money. Look at bonds. The other day they took an infrastructure bond of 200 and something billion shillings. I think it was February. What infrastructure on the budget was being funded? Nothing. Nothing. These bonds and bills have funded nothing in our budget. And yet, do you know how much interest we have paid for 5.1 trillion over 10 years? We have paid them a total of 2.7 trillion in interest payments. This is criminality beyond your imagination. And there are some key banks here that have perpetuated this fraud. KCB, Cooperative Bank, Equity Bank. Those are three banks that have perpetuated a very clear fraud on the Kenyan public, us as depositors, and us as taxpayers, and made humongous profits, become oligarchs against the sovereign, against us. And we must start saying we are not going to take this rubbish anymore. And this rubbish goes this way. If you have deposits in those banks, if your parents have deposits in those banks, we should pull them out tomorrow, not today, not yesterday, not the day after, tomorrow, if not today. Remove that money. Take it to banks that are not defrauding us, because what is happening there is a fraud of the highest proportions. I want to go back to the London Club debts. These bonds, Euro bonds, these syndicated bonds, these syndicated loans, none of those appear on the budget. But one underlying fact you will find is that somewhere along the way, like you saw recently with the latest payments of Eurobond, the last payment of Eurobond was paid 500 so-called billion balance, right, of the 2 billion we had borrowed. That was paid by World Bank, IMF. Why are they underwriting money that never came to us? Who is this that they are backing? So here they are. They encourage us to take those very expensive loans, knowing full well they are not on a budget. And then when we can't pay, IMF comes up and it starts rattling. Oh, we can save you, but these are the conditions. And the conditions become a matter they become a matter of our slavery. Now, all this information I'm giving is in the public domain. Our forensic audit is in the public domain. We got it from public documents. We are not trying to create new documentation. And we've been speaking this for the last 2 years. Kenyans need to understand categorically that we are in a mode of slavery. And I'll perpetuate this slavery by going back to the point where we were saying today 80% of our tax revenue is going to one item called debt. These debts I'm talking about, and which we have already paid for, don't owe, but we are going to keep being made to pay unless we cut off this chain because it is illegal. We do not owe it. This coming financial year, 2024-2025, the estimate from the Treasury of debt payments, keeping the current exchange rate, is 1.853164. In other words, 1.853 trillion shillings is going towards the debt payments this financial year of 2024-2025. You come to the year 2025-2026, it is 2.2 trillion to be paid to debt payments. You go to the next year, 2026-2027, is 2.352. And remember, we are getting what you call diminishing returns on our revenue, the Laffer curve, which is the maximum you can squeeze out of us. There is no item in our budget that is taking so much money. People are complaining item in debt payments, in any payment. Nothing is doing that. Nothing at all. This is the tragedy that we are living in. We are in slavery. And we are in such slavery that William Ruto is soon going to come and tell us that he can to your account. They start telling you that you've got to take a share of this. Otherwise, the banks will close and we're going to have serious problems here. Ghana, Ghana, Ghana went through this. And Ghana are suffering today. They are suffering from 2022 December, where 70%, 70 shillings of every 100 went to debt. They are suffering. And I can tell you, it is so tragic because you go back to the London Club debts. You go back to these so-called Mzungus guy that he's talking about, these criminals that have perpetuated this fraud. Morgan Chase. They have been part of a conspiracy because if you are going to loan anybody money, the first thing you must do is your due diligence. What are you giving this money for? Is it in line with the laws of Kenya? Which project is being funded? The Euro bond that was taken in 2013. Something fishy going on here. And you know all he had? He was just simply reading what are called the the National Treasury quarterly reports. That is all. And he said, the president stood up when he said he's taking the Eurobond. And he said, because he's taking the Eurobond, they are not going to borrow domestically. The estimate at the time was about 300 billion shillings. A Eurobond that he was taking. But when I look at the budget, quarterly report, and they are not recording what happened to the Eurobond. That $1 billion, they 2014. In fact, by May 2014. And that $2 billion, they showed us what is called the expenditure pattern of those dollars. So they said one of the first 1 billion, $650 million of that money went to pay a syndicated loan of Mwai Kibaki directly to a bank called Barclays Bank. In fact, Standard Chartered, sorry. And they showed us a SWIFT transfer of that amount. Then a SWIFT transfer is to show, like you get an RTGS that shows from point A to point B, it went to the account and was credited. Exchequer account 00010,0003987. And they showed us very clearly that account. 350 credited. We said, Hallelujah, Asante Sana. Very good work. Then we said, where's the second one? They said, oh, the second one, we hung on to until September 350. Show us this amount of 1 billion, how it came to the treasury. Said, because the 350 that came to the treasury, came to the central bank, account number one, it showed categorically that you had a SWIFT transfer. You even had your letters from CBK addressed to the treasury, showing the exchange rate confirmation that you transferred to Kenya shillings. Show us the same for this $1 billion in September. They sent and put up a SWIFT transfer. But that SWIFT transfer did not show us where that money went. It was completely blackened out. Apart from the top, where you see it leaving an account at JP Morgan Chase, the rest was completely blackened. From Citibank, what they called tap sales of $815 billion, right? That $815 billion, they showed us the SWIFT transfer. It came to an account they had now created in the central bank called a sovereign wealth account, some 10,12674 account, not September. Where is it? They never ever showed us. We eventually saw it in the Auditor General special audit of the Eurobond done by Edward Auko. And Edward Auko in his report says that this amount entered an account called 8,214 something. We said, what account is this? We don't know it. We don't know it at all. What is even one iota of that SWIFT transfer like they had done for the others? Even the letter exchanging the amount from dollars to Kenya shillings, central bank saying this is the exchange value amount, they didn't show us. These amounts cannot be attached to not even one project. And actually, even in his conclusion, says that when he asked the Treasury, what were these monies so-called used for? The Treasury says that these funds one Eurobond of $2 billion. One did not come here. They subsequently took another 5. Please take note. They subsequently took another 7 in syndicated loans. We cannot find anywhere in our budget and in our books. Now, Kenyans, are we going to continually accept that we are going to become slaves and have agreed to become slaves? Because this is what is called modern day slavery. Now, and for generations, slavery was something that was done with chains put to our hands and our feet. That is what is happening here with this debt. Debt has now been used by our own oligarchs, our own people others outside this land who know what is going on, who know the illegalities of what has been perpetuated, to ensure that we are slaves to them in perpetuity. You can complain about the finance bill today or tomorrow, which are tax raising measures, but we are going down so fast as it is strangling us, it is finishing us for generations to come. And my proposal has been very clear. What is not in our laws, what does not exist in our constitution, is not liable to the sovereign. We are not and should not pay it. We must cut this chain off our neck. We must remove it. And those who put us in this mess we are suffering. They are not going to hang themselves. So William Ruto should not pretend that we do not owe any debt to anybody. We do not. In fact, if we and we must cut this link, and those who are perpetuating it must face justice. And those foreigners who have been part of this, who have been perpetuating this, who know what they are doing to our demise as a country, we will also follow you, we will look for you. Have been good friends of Kenya in the past. Why do you want us to be your slaves? So, my fellow Kenyans, we start with our own. Those who are perpetuating our slavery in something called domestic debt, those from those banks, tell them they are not at liberty to continue your slavery. Tell those banks that decide they are going to put money in bonds and bills to our detriment, bonds and children, that we cannot account for. We are not going to agree anymore. Stop them and tell them that you are going to go and greet them if they perpetuate this mentality. But now that they have done it and they have sunk us, take your money back. Tell them you are going to
All right.
Yes, loud and clear.
So you, what have you done, or what are you doing in your position? Because I know you are capable, you have the means. What are you doing in your position to ensure that justice on this economic fraud is given to Kenyans, because Kenyans right now are unable to put money in their pockets. It
That's
is
correct.
bad.
I don't know what's happening.
We must cut off this chain, and it comes by cutting off these people in power. They must exit power. That is number one. In our own way, we have educated people. There are people who are taking up cases in courts abroad, because there's no point of trying to do it in Paris and in London, right? For various saying we are not going to agree. We are not going to agree that our children were born to be slaves and their children to be even worse slaves than they were. We must say no, and we must collectively come together and agree. We will see greatness in this nation, and you see us stretch this way.
I don't know what might be the reason. But I think it's with the space, yeah, EX, a desktop. That is where the problem
Chain, we are moving nowhere. And anybody telling you they can perform will not perform if they're not talking about removing this chain. All the rest is balderdash, it is lies. You have to remove Amerix. We are educating. We've taken 2 years. We spent money doing this forensic audit. We are educating. We are talking. We keep speaking. When I first their collective lives as a great Kenyans is going to drive them. So I will keep educating. I will keep informing. And you can write me off all you want, but I'll keep speaking.
is. But yeah,
Nothing else it has set in. There are two twin evils. Just to digress a bit in economics, it's election because 80% of it is
Nadhani ni kitu niko na shida. Kitu ya desktop ndiko na shida.
a general election. Other people can do this. They have greater ideas than I do to solve this problem, or maybe more guts. This has happened to other people. The liquidity out of COVID in the UK, they literally printed money and they could solve it. Now here you have a situation where, if we are to be honest, and Ruto is to be honest with himself, he cannot solve this problem. No matter what he talks, he cannot solve it because he's too tied in it. Don't waste Kenya's time. There are always other people who can do this. Get out of the way. Exit honorably. Usher us through another general election where now Kenyans are listening to the issue. They're not being cheated by marupurupu and goodies to be given. There's no goodies here. We have a problem to solve, because if we solve this problem, our greatness begins. And I say our greatness because it was just interrupted. We were on our way to our greatness, it was interrupted. Our greatness begins. Allow those that the people feel can solve their problem to sit there. You don't have to hang in there. There's nowhere where it says you must have a contract of 5 years.
Hang in there, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
I see my co-host Nyakundi is there, and there is a lady here who was talking about Pan-Africanism and IMF and World Bank. Maybe Nyakundi, can you bring her?
Excuse me. Hello.
Just hold on a minute, Tony. Just a minute.
Tulikuwa nataka hawa kubwa. Tumegonga wangapi? Tumegonga gapi? Wote. Hata Kidiki. Leo rahisi nikekupanda kwa kiasi ngekunulia chai.
Yes. Where's that lady? Kadomi.
Good evening, Eric and the team.
Go on.
Thank you so much for having me in this space. Just a bit about myself. I have experience in election observation. And lately in 2022, I was a campaign manager. I worked with Azimio, worked with in the side of Mount Kenya with Jubilee Party, and I did a lot of work in these elections, and I have a lot to talk about elections in Kenya because it's something I'm into, and I'm also into governance and public administration as a career. So I know you wanted me to talk about elections. I'll just go through it like real quick about what exactly happens in our Kenyan election. And I would say the only election that was a people's election in Kenya was 2002, the Kibaki Tosha election. That is the only time that Kenyans were able to get what they voted for. We moved to 2007, where we had the post-election violence, the Kibaki and Raila election. A lot of that election had local manipulation, local players, what people would call, it was a local elite that would manipulate a people's will. That was not a fair election in the country. Even the Electoral Commission then, that was Kivoito then, he died saying that we do not know who won the election. I am saddened because there's no one who has come out to even write a book about the 2007-2008 election, where many Kenyans lost their lives. That was another election that has never been audited. And until today, we do not have a Kenyan election that has been audited. Most of the Kenyan elections are swept under the rugs, and we are made to believe elections have gone in a particular way. And that led to a coalition government after the post-election violence. And of course, the Ruto and Uhuru going to Hague. In 2013, we had the Uhuru and Ruto ticket. Another election that has never been audited. When I say this, we cannot authentically say that this particular individual won an election in Kenya, because there is no election in Kenya from 2007 where we've had servers opened. I will pull this quickly to 2022, the last election. But just to mention on 2013 election, where we had Akombe resigning, we had them Sando Day, we had a lot of things that happened in that election. But Kenyans, we just want to move on quickly and settle down. But all in these elections, it's not a people's election. In 2013, coming down, our elections have been manipulated externally in a big way. Manipulated. It's a long funded, but these are small ways of programming Kenyan elections. And we pull it all the way to and I've been studying a lot and following the money. Most of the money that comes to IEBC is Kenyan elections. And even to be brief and to go to exactly in the 2022 elections, you saw the Azimio team went to Chatham House, but what the media tells us is, of course, the European Union, the Western world is taking care of their interests. But that's not what happens. That's where they're doing an interview of who is going to be the president of what country. And now speaking about lucky in being the anointed people. Elections in Kenya start from the very end.
Nashangaa sijui kuna shida gani, nimerefresh lakini
We will ever be able to audit a Kenyan election.
tena iko nyuma. Nyimbo ina behave, but nadhani ni hiyo pia.
It is not who is popular, it is who has been anointed to be the leader. That's why everyone was
Dagan, saizi jioni.
details. But for example, Kiambu County had an excess of 500,000 votes on one candidate. But people say, could sway a whole election. No one has ever looked keenly or talked about Smartmatic and how Kenyan is set to change or sway the data. That is what happens on Kenyan election. This is not local. This is not something done locally. It is an international manipulation of a Kenyan election. Someone needs to write a document about how we've lost our sovereignty. That's why when our president was sworn into office, he has done everything that's a foreign policy. It's not a Kenyan policy. In the Kibaki administration, public participation, nothing discussed in parliament, and GMO was allowed in Kenya. Every single loan that is coming to Kenya right now through IMF and World Bank has a social economic. That's why right now the agriculture bill has been passed. That's why right now it's a criminal activity to carry out agricultural activities unless you have a diploma in agriculture. Otherwise, you face a jail term or a bail. If anyone is willing, lawyers listening to this, please audit every single bill that has been passed in the Kenyan parliament. It's a like on the 24th of July, there is a case. There are Kenyan agriculturists who have come together who are suing because it's now criminal to share seeds in Kenya. These are legislations that have gone through the parliament. That's why I would say this is the worst government I've ever seen as a Kenyan. Because no one cares about the bills they have passed in that parliament. Why is our president jumping as high as the foreign masters want him to jump? Because they played a big role in his presidency. He has no stance to fight for the Kenyan people. That's why he was the best candidate for them. And if anyone feels like my sentiments are not true, tell me one single thing he has done that is good for the Kenyan people. Even this finance bill is all a social economic structure attached to IMF funding. When you study all these things that have happened in this country, you realize the foreign hand in the Kenyan democracy, it is so huge. And I will shock you when I tell you, even on the opposition side, high level, they always know where the presidency is going. I will shock you to tell you, even Raila knew, let me do this thing to maintain my backyard, to maintain the control of half of the country. He has a big following. To control Azimio, to have a big number members of parliament, members of parliament in parliament. But he knew he's not going to ascend to presidency because he sort of lost the willingness to keep fighting because it's a big monster to fight. When the election is done, he'll quickly be meeting the ambassadors. He'll quickly be meeting the EU commissioners because the players that have to manipulate both sides. That's why even now, his AU seat is really attached to these foreign bodies. They just want to balance an equilibrium in Kenya because we are the products in the market. We are the slaves. They're squeezing every little life out of us as they manipulate a sitting government and manipulate an opposition. And as we sit here, Discussions are underway of building a government of sort of national unity. I don't know if they're going to call it coalition. And they think that is going to quell the cry of Kenyans right now. They just want a working situation to continue pushing their social economic agendas, which are not Kenyan, which are not for the good of any Kenyan. Venezuelan hand in the Kenyan government, it was huge. The foreigners played a big role in diverting the will of the people. And I will tell you again and again, what you see today is not what Kenyans voted. Thank you, Eric, for your time.
Oh, what do you mean?
My God, I wonder. I wonder.
What I'm going to teach you in.
So, Cyprian, go on. I can't take this.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Allow me to bring in Mr. Tony Gashoka into the broadcast. So kindly you can proceed.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? This is an important subject because it's dealing with economic pain. Economic pain is actually the whole purpose of any government. And unfortunately for ourselves right now, the government is not being held to account. When the framers of the 2010 Constitution put it together, under Article 4, which declared Kenya to be a republic, there was the provision that Kenya is a sovereign republic under Part 1, but under Part 2, the Republic of Kenya shall be a multi-party democratic state founded on national values and the principles of government that follow Article 10. The reason that I'm bringing this up is because the only way in which a democratic republic can function is when the government of the day is held to account by the people of the country. Hello? Am I being heard?
Yes. Go on. We can hear you.
And I want to bring this alarm because Jimmy Wanjigi was speaking competently about what the executives have been doing wrong. And he was talking about the need for us, the people, to hold that government to account. But the only reason that we are being asked to hold the government to account is because of the complete failure of the opposition. And therefore, we cannot have any discussion about progressing Kenya with only Ruto must go. There must include the removal of this parliament and this senate. Because the President Ruto, when he came into office, his first act was to buy political parties. All of you saw how quickly he moved to do that. And where he could not buy the parties, he bought individual members of parliament. Under our constitution, which is modeled under the Westminster model, the opposition is meant to be an official opposition with equal power to a government so that they can oppose the government of the day in order that the people can get a better government. And the public finances in the consolidated fund are meant to fund that opposition equally as they fund a cabinet and as they fund the presidency. so that at any point the country is having a mirror. Our country is having a dual view, dual highway as to what is happening in the country. And since we allowed Ruto to raid the opposition benches and to actually assume the majority leader in parliament, when actually Azimio won the majority of members in parliament, then nobody is holding Ruto to account. Traditionally, the watchdogs in parliament, the Parliamentary Accounts Committee, the Public Investment Committee, are chaired by the opposition. And the constitution under the Westminster model envisaged that a government cannot police itself. It must be policed by the opposition. And the Attorney General and the Auditor General and all the heads of any corporation or ministry were required to go to either committee for scrutiny, the same way they would have to go if the president was to summon them. And these are the reports, for example, that came during the Golden Bag scandal, during the Moi time, during the Kibaki time, the agro-leasing scandal, and so forth. But now what you have is the executive in full control of parliament, in full control of the executive, and therefore there is no accountability. And the citizens, as Jimmy is saying, we need to educate people, but the level at which we are educating the people means they don't have the access to government records. And unless Jimmy had put the kind of money he did to get the forensic audit, it was not possible. Yet the Constitution provides that we, the people, fund the opposition, and they have access to government records, have got access to everything so that they can give us this information. So as a people, we should never have reached this position if Parliament and if the opposition was doing its work. Why do I raise this issue? I raise this issue because the Jay-Z revolution of 2024 is very different from the revolutions we had run before against Moi and against the second liberation, let's say. And the reason it is different, they started with the no finance bill by occupying parliament and naming the MPs, tukaenda tukasalimie hawa ma MPs. Then what happened is there was equal fear on government MPs as there was on opposition MPs. And it was the panic of those members of parliament because of this revolution strategy that jilted Ruto to say he will not sign the finance bill. It's because MPs went to him and told him we are finished. If we do this, we are gone, and these people will throw us out. So I want to say that I think if we look at the way forward, we must of all right now start being very, very critical of the people we are calling were heroes of yesterday. My friend Raila Odinga, who Jimmy and I know well, I want to warn him in this forum, and I want to tell him openly, if you become the man that goes to save Zakayo, you will not only be abdicating your responsibility as an opposition leader, but you will be killing the democratic state that was envisaged by our founding fathers. And this will be a legacy even Jaramogi will not forgive you for. Because the whole idea of fighting for Section 2A under the Moi regime was that we have a multi-party state where opposition parties would hold the government of the day to account. This way we are proceeding is making our citizens go and elect us in elections, which is their duty, and then tell them to manage the executive, to hold it to account and to remove it when they have also elected opposition MPs to do that on their behalf. So I wanted today to change this conversation to say that as we go to the streets from the 16th of this month, we go with two pieces of agenda. That even if Ruto was to go home, but we elect this kind of MPs, we are going to go nowhere. I want to give two examples. The MP for Cilicia, John Waluke, was convicted by a competent court of his peers to 67 years in jail for stealing 1 billion shillings from the National Cereal and Produce Board. Waluke was told in the alternative of his death sentence, he will have to pay back the 1 billion shillings. Not only was Waluke released on an appeal, he participated in an election, was re-elected to parliament against Chapter 10 of the Leadership Act, but he's still an MP, was elected under an opposition ticket, but now is working with William Ruto. So what are the Kenyan people being treated to? We are being treated to musical chairs of these people who have been corrupted in the system. So it doesn't matter if they're in the opposition or in the government, they are all in one boat. And this is why we must sound this alarm. Because if the MCAs in Eldoret or where that young lady was coming from, I could hear her pain of this Finland money. If all the MCAs of the opposition had taken her clarion call, I can tell you that money would have been paid back by the county. But because the executive is not doing it and the opposition is not doing it, this young girl becomes the advocate of the grandfathers and grandmothers of that area of Kenya. So today I want to say this, and I really hope that Raila Odinga's friends are on this line. Because before this, the only critic of Raila Odinga was Meguna. And I found sometimes he could be excessive in his language. But I want to tell Odinga, after working with him for several years, Kenya is at crossroads. And this particular time, I know you're having resistance from other leaders of Azimio who are not boarding on this idea of a cabinet reshuffle or an idea of some kind of dialogue. I want to tell this country why the court rejected BBI. BBI was rejected by 5 judges of the High Court because they said that this was driven by the president and Raila Odinga. It was not driven by the public. It was not people-driven. And because it was not people-driven, the judges, Judge Ogunda, Judge Ngugi, Judge Nyaga, and Matheka, and all of them said that the only way to alter the constitution is to involve the people and get them to begin their agenda. Now, when you say you're going to have a dialogue, and you're calling it a public dialogue, but you're not involving the people, you are saying it as Raila. You are going to do to us again what you tried to do to BBI. Because the people who are marching and who started this agenda asked you to stay at home. Why are you leaving the house? Stay where they asked you to stay. If they want dialogue, they will ask for it. If they want to talk to Ruto, they'll ask for it. Why are you intervening in a constitutional moment where the people are only acting because the opposition is not acting? So as Jimmy is saying, if these matters had just also had more people giving Jimmy some space, if there were more leaders in the opposition, if there were more people adding voice and adding firewood to this fire, this issue of economic rape and economic destruction of Kenya would have reached all of us sooner before we get from the frying pan to the fire. Why am I raising these things? I'm raising these things because I was a press officer or press head of ODM in 2007 and working for Raila Odinga. And that time, I remember that when there was post-election violence in Kenya, Anyang' Nyong'o, who was Secretary General of ODM, wrote a letter to the Hague, to the prosecutor, and said, as ODM, we would like to bring information of crimes against humanity that were done in this country. And they named William Ruto as one of the offenders, according to the violations that could amount to human rights. And following the letter of ODM, William Ruto was charged with 3 crimes of forcible eviction of population and so forth under the Charter of Human Rights. And the same Raila today is telling us that this thing he saw on the streets where 41 people were killed, when he was leading demonstrations, 70-somebody people were killed. He's okay with it now that he can talk to Ruto for some dialogue, to form some government of national unity. Then I have a duty to call out who was my former friend and say, as much as we are fighting Ruto, we must fight you. Because if you are going to take the country back every time we move forward, this generation cannot inherit our mistakes because we have allowed this to continue to be the modus operandi. We go forward and deals are made from IPPG, a settlement, political settlement. We go back, government of national unity. We go back, we go to NADCO. From the day we went to NADCO, what one thing has been implemented in NADCO? People told me the other day there is an electoral commission. That electoral commission, who will appoint those people who will go to appoint commissioners? It will be a meeting between Raila Odinga and William Ruto. And if Odinga remains compromised as he is, how do you think we'll have a people's electoral commission? And that is why this nation, this country at this time, must do everything possible to constitute a public constituent assembly, form a transitional authority, and take power. And I want to say, if we do not do that, then these generations and those people who died will repeat the mistakes of their fathers. We are going to go back to a talking shop. We are going to go back to political settlements. Raila will be the chairman of the African Union. His daughter will be the head of somewhere in Yala, and Kalon and whoever else will be where. I just want you and this country to understand the dangers we are in. The dangers that we have are not tied to the executive. They are tied to abuse of the 2010 constitution. As I finalize, I wanted to say that under the 2010 constitution, chapter 4 gave the Bill of Rights. And that Bill of Rights, read together with chapter 1, where the sovereignty is with the people, was put in Bomas of Kenya by a very senior people like Yash Guy for a reason. Because they foresaw a situation where the government and the opposition betray the people. So in the 2010 constitution, and Kenya has one of the most advanced constitutions in the world, they put the Bill of Rights, where the sovereignty ran with the people. And to change that constitution, the executive could not manipulate the opposition to change it. And why the BBI was defeated by the High Court is they said if the executive conspires with the opposition to change the constitution, then the public will be have no defense. And this is a preserve only for the people of Kenya. And therefore, I would like to encourage. I want to thank Eric for this opportunity. I didn't want to get deep into the economics because I thought speakers before me have got very clear issues on the public debt and where it is and the problems that we have. And of course, that it's really impossible to solve this problem without either a default or a forgiveness of debt. It is just not possible. So my parting comment is that, ambition without knowledge is like a ship on land. And we may be happy saying Ruto must go, but I fear that if we don't change, not just the people who are in parliament, but the way we vote to a tribeless, active, informed election throughout the country, if we do not reduce the cost of leaders, we have 47 counties when we could have 7. We have a woman leader or woman representative who does nothing. She has no duty in the constituency. She has no duty in the county, paid by the public. We've got so many parliamentarians, I don't know how many hundreds, when we could have just 100. We have a bloated system because we said, if we decentralize resources, governors will be okay. Now we have got 47 centers of corruption. Nairobi County should be a ministry in the government of Kenya because of its enormity. And because it is late in the day, and I know many of these people will have things to say, I just wanted to contribute into this conversation that maybe we should have a bird's eye view, a deeper assessment on protecting the democratic state. And it cannot be protected by the executive alone. It must be protected outside the executive as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Gen Z, I'm waiting for my young siblings to come. Where is Kiduze? Kiduze. Is he there? Kiduze. Chwani.
Hello?
Chwani? Yes.
Oh, I admit.
Go on. Please go on. Chwani?
What's really happening? What's up? Good.
and pretend that he's one of us. He's trying to come and kingpin himself as people love Raila. We used to love him, but now his plan is to come. He pretends ajifanya kona sisi, but then when we now embrace him, he now goes and sells us to the Sugoi merchant once again. What I'm just trying to say is, do not accept that. We must remain. So I'm not going to talk about that pretty much. I'm planning to kuna files bado na kusanya hapa na pale before I give you a full dosage of what is actually happening, because I've come to understand even there's a part of where the Pandora Papers, this whole thing it's like a food web, a very big web that is interconnected. Easy conservancies is our learning, a lot of dark things that are happening at the expense of Kenyans are really happening. New Maya tent.
Okay.
So we must our goal at okay.
Okay.
I'm not going to talk much. Taki, maybe there are other people who want to say. Our movement, we must not allow him.
Okay.
He's a sellout.
All right.
Yeah, that's all.
Thank you very much. There was Mercy here who talked a lot about fertilizer and I've heard Tony talk about the members of parliament, how they've wasted us. I'm not giving a chance to politicians to speak, but there is this politician who voted no. I think is the only one from Bungoma County. He should tell us why he voted no and why his other colleagues voted yes. He should tell us. Jack Wanami, Bumula. How are you, sir?
Mzuri sana bana.
Yes. Mzuri, go on. We give you 4 minutes.
Thank you for inviting me in this space. I'm Wanami Wamboka, Member of Parliament, Bumula constituency. Voted on DAP ticket Azimio, and of course I voted no for the finance bill for reasons that are clear. That one, William Ruto is taking this country in a different direction. I was a sponsor of the Linturi Oster motion because I believed, and I still believe, Mithika Linturi needs to be in jail. Now, listen, Kenyans, you have a minister, first, who brings in contaminated sugar, which has gone to affect Kenyans. And by the way, you may not realize today, a lot of Kenyans are going to suffer from cancer cases because of the contaminated sugar that got its way to the market of Kenya because we had a fraudulent minister called Mithika Linturi. And Kenyans move on as if nothing happened. Then this guy brings in fertilizer that is contaminated. He moves and because of his issues, he goes and gives a company called MEMS Distribution Company, of course, belonging to his former brother-in-law, which has never been involved in distribution, manufacturing, or fertilizer in any way. So that MEMS proceeds now to look for real manufacturers and distributors of fertilizer in the name of chaos. These guys ordinarily just fraudulently give Kenyans bad fertilizer. Can you hear me, Eric? Hello? Eric, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. You see, the guy oversteps the constitution, decides to deal with the National Cereals Board, who does not have the mandate to deal, distribute, manufacture, package, and everything about fertilizer. So when the thing came up in the public, of course, Mithika Inturi was a crook. He's a fraudster. I looked around. I'm also the chairman of Public Investments Committee, Education and Governance. So we oversight. One of my roles is to oversight government. So I decided to put in a petition, a motion to remove Mithika Inturi. And by the way, we successfully impeached Mithika Inturi. 149 against 33. That those members who were not in parliament that day, who wanted to vote virtually, and the list could have been even longer. They form a committee now to look at the merits and demerits of the motion. I was so frustrated. At that time,
All right. I think we completely lost him. And let me welcome Stay Hidden. And then Stay Hidden, then Mahanu. I want more of these Gen Zs. Where are they? These 24, 23, 22-year-olds. I want you here. I want you to speak. This is your generation. This is your movement. Stay hidden. Stay hidden.
Am I audible?
Yeah, please go on. Please go on.
Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Am I audible? Oh, okay. Okay, sawa. So on my aspect, nitaongelea na story ya how we can solve where the problems we are having right now. And I'll keep it short. According to mwenye tumeambiwa hapo na Wanjigi, we can see from the primary balance audit, tumepata tuko na balance ya 1.3 trillion. Lakini the government ilienda kuchukua loan ya 7.7 trillion. That means hakuna mtu akitaka kukuibia, for example nikitaka kwenda kuiba, siwezi enda kuiba kwa kwa ghettos, itabidi nimeenda kuiba, kana nataka kuiba billions, nitaenda kuiba kwa banks zenye ziko huko Westlands and posh place niko sure nitatoka hapo na pesa mzuri. That's what the government is doing. The government inaweka pesa, inatuwekea pesa kwa mfuko ndio ituibie, kwa sababu the deficit was there, it was kidogo, na wangejaribu kuiba, some development projects hazingeendelea na pia mishahara ingelipwa. So through that balance audit inaonyesha tu simply the government ilienda kuborrow excess 7.7 trillion, more than 1.3 trillion. Kwa sababu gani? Kwa sababu inataka iwekee pesa kwa mfuko iwaibie. And through those Kenya Wanjigi ameelezea, ukiangalia through just the first year in 2014, the government had already initiated plans so that in those plans walikuwa washa claim an odious debt of 0.7 trillion. Na hiyo unaangalia ni the Eurobond of 2014 peke yake. Ukiangalia Eurobond of 2014 peke yake na the SGR deal, ukichanganya hizo zote mbili, zote zina up to almost 0.7 trillion. And how can we curb these loopholes? If you want to get more details about how the Eurobond, niko na thread na nimeweka hapo kwa charts, utaangalia there is a thread about public debt scrutiny yenye inaongelea kuhusu Eurobond, na kuna thread nyingine ambayo inaongelea SGR. You can see from those threads there. So on another thing that we'll need to curb loopholes pia ni corruption. Corruption through.
Okay.
Am I audible?
Yeah, you're audible, but you need to go straight to the point.
In corruption, pia there's threads about corruption, especially on budgeted corruption. In this sense, Wanjigi ashatuelezea more about public debt wherever we are. I'll give an example of budgeted corruption and it may happen. I have another thread on budgeted corruption about national government, but let's see this an example of roads project. For example, in 2013 to 2017, the Jubilee government increased roads by 5,800 kilometers during that period. Now, during that period, it spent 614 billion on roads. That was 60% more than the Kibaki government yenye ilikuwa imetumia 376 billion. Ukikuja, the average cost per kilometer the Jubilee government used was 96 million per kilometer. But ukiangalia what the other government used, previous government used was 51 million per kilometer. That's a very big margin and increase. Na kwa nini hiyo margin inaonekana kuincrease hapo? Ukikuja 5 years later, utapata 9 roads zenye zilijengwa zilikuwa zinatumia 300 million per kilometer. And these roads accounted for 20% of the portfolio of the roads that were built during that period. Now only 3% by volume. Notable roads zenye zilijengwa na hiyo amount ni hiyo ya Masara to Kisumu Airport na Mombasa Southeastern Bypass. Especially the Mombasa Southeastern Bypass was built by 1,155 per kilometer. Na the previous government ilikuwa imebuild na per kilometer utapata hapo ni 30 million per something of that sort. So the government inaweka projects at a higher cost so that so long as hii kitu inaenda itapitishwa kwa appropriations bill, hakuna kitu tunaweza fanya government not to steal. So in my own view, what I think is, but you can go, niko na thread about budgeted corruption on roads. You can check on those details. Iko na more details na ni iko kwa chat, na kuna another thread on budgeted corruption on electricity. Iko na more details on how the government make sure inatumia loophole. Should I say a loophole ama ina abuse whatever? So long as washa budget kwa appropriations bill, whatever they'll steal from there ni wao. Right. So what are the solutions that we can stop such things? In my case, as conversing with other Gen Z, we realize that we can't trust the government right now. At the same sense, we can't even trust the judicial system. Government bado inalipa the judicial system. So regardless of the president ama the regime in place, watakuwa wanalipa judicial system. Na ukiangalia hata EACC, we can't even trust EACC. Nilikuwa naangalia a certain meme ilikuwa inatembea ati after 2000 cases, only 20 cases, less than 20 cases ndio zimekuwa prosecuted na zika go through. Na that's a very that's a massive failure rate. So as Gen Z, we can never trust this judicial, we can never trust EACC, na pia tuwezi trust the wabunge. For example, during this current financial year, the parliament approved only 313 to come from external loans, but ukiangalia kwa budget yenye wamepitisha kwa appropriations bill pale, wanasema aje, wanataka external loans ikuwe almost 850 somewhere there. Maximum imeongezeka ya almost 500. Hiyo yote imeombwa unconstitutional. Na the same thing it happened ukiangalia from 2013 to 2022. Uhuru did, 2013 to 2022, yeah. Uhuru did the same thing. Amekuwa approved 4 trillion and end up borrow 7.7 trillion. These are loopholes they'll continue to use. And if set up policies that are inscribed in the constitution, hawataacha, regardless of the president or the regime in place or the members of parliament in place. So in my own view, I think we can have a Bitcoin, a blockchain system. A blockchain system, let me break it down simply so that people can understand how can a blockchain system help us. For example, let's assume umekuja kununua nyumba, let's say umekuja town, no, ama you are in Thika Road and you're looking for a house na umepata Roysambu, I'm there, umenipata mimi ndio nauza nyumba. I give you a folder. In that folder, if you open page 1, unaona 2001, this house was built. Ukifungua next folder, unaona 2002, kulikuwa na renovation ya mabati and what not. 2003, but ukiangalia nyumba, unaona hii nyumba ilijengwa na ile bricks ama mawe zile zilikuwa zinatumika na wazungu, the British by that then. Hauwezi trust my folder. So blockchain simply is what can I say? Is simply a diary in this sense. Kama nauza hii nyumba, so nyumba zote zenye ziko hapa tunaweka na diary na sio mimi peke yake. It's a distributed ledger in that mimi na watu wote wanaishi kwa hii kijiji tuko na hii diary. Na any renovation I make kwa hii nyumba na keep kwa hii diary. So mtu mwenye anakuja kununua hii nyumba akiangalia diary yangu anaenda kuconfirm with another diaries from other people. That's what blockchain does. Inakuwa distributed ledger from very many people. In case my diary has information that other diaries zenye zimerecord all those transactions haiko hapo, that means my diary iko compromised. So my diary itatupwa kwa system, itatupwa kwa hiyo chain. Zile blockchain zenye zina diary zina entries zenye zinafanana, they'll still remain in the empty chain. So in short, how can blockchain help us? For once, hata kama President Ruto amefukuza the cabinet secretaries, we as Gen Z, we don't trust that ati Ruto atakuja back appoint other cabinet secretary based on competence. Hatuko sure, maybe ata-appoint bado on political loyalty or that. But for example, through blockchain voting, tunaweza amua kukuwe na certain threshold ya watu fulani kwa kila county ama kila constituency, wapige kura through blockchain voting so that to approve hiyo sisi wananchi tugeuze power ikuwe power, we bring back power to us as citizens, so that sisi citizen tupige kura through blockchain voting. Haitaitisha pesa mingi ya IBC ku hold elections. It's just a blockchain voting. So long as uko na phone ama laptop, utapigia, tuta approve that yes. Another thing, loan approval.
Please, wind up.
Na blockchain voting wakati anytime the government wants to take loan. For example, penye nilikuwa nimesema kama Ruto alikuwa ameapproviwa na government only 313 loans. Kama alikuwa ameapprove only 313 billion na anaenda pana kwa budget anasema nataka 870 billion. Hiyo ingine 500 ni extra. But ukiwa na blockchain voting tuta make sure so long as una loan the Kenyan government, kama utaenda against the constitution, ni shauri yako, hiyo deni hatutalipa. Na kwa constitution tushaweka kutakuwa na blockchain voting yenye kama president yoyote mwenye yuko in place, si wa leo ama wa kesho, tutavote kama hiyo wananchi wana approve hiyo deni, sawa, atapewa. Kama wananchi hawa approve hiyo deni, hatapewa. Another thing yenye tunafaa tuvotie on through that blockchain voting, loan usage. Hiyo loan itumike wapi?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Let us go to the next. Did you finish, Jack? Did you get your internet? Did Jack get his internet back? Jack, did you get your internet back? As we wait for Jack to finish what he was saying, where is Chwani? Where is Chwani? He's nowhere to be found. He's nowhere to be found.
Yeah.
Mahanu, yeah, Mahanu can go on.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can go on.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Titus Mahanu. I am I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I practice here in Nairobi for over 10 years now. I have been working in my own small way to try and dismantle these cartels that are tearing down our country. I've been doing my bit, especially on issues that concern KEMSA, because I'm one of the service providers there. In fact, on the 22nd of this month, we have a huge case that involves the chairman and some part of the management that are demanding a bribe of 15 million from me before they can approve payment of the services that we rendered. A while ago, I saw the story being shared on Twitter, and I'd like to invite all Kenyans from all walks of life to keep on monitoring this. So back to the issue that concerns what we're discussing about. I'm going to talk about three issues. Number one, the Finland scandal. I've heard about the cries that the lady from Wasingishu is talking about. I understand that there is a criminal case that is going on, but we all need to understand that a criminal case will never lead to refund of that money. The most that is likely to happen is that those people that were involved, as well as the county government, are going to be found guilty, convicted, or probably ordered to pay a fine. But still, the money that was lost it is highly unlikely that the money is going to be refunded. So what needs to be done, because Eric and the viewers are asking that the real action that needs to be done at this particular moment is we need to put our heads together and file a recovery suit against the county government of Wasingishu, as well as Senator Mandago and all those scoundrels that were involved in this heist. So that is point number one. I'm also going to talk about, and perhaps we can get in touch with Eric and Cyprian so that we can put up a legal team. I am willing to be part and parcel of that legal team. I can see my senior Willis is here, and we can work through on this issue so that we can help those people that have suffered in Wasingishu. Number two, I'm going to talk about the public debt, and I'm going to pick it up from where Jimmy left. The state is so deplorable that we need to action this. What we need to understand is that all judicial authority in our country belongs to the people. And the same way the Gen Zs have come up and they have forced the withdrawal of the finance bill, the people in this country can also come up and demand that the judiciary must exercise the judicial authority in a manner that is in line with the Constitution. I believe that systems are always designed to deliver results. So when you see a system like the judiciary failing to deliver results, that means someone is tampering with the system to make it work that way for their own selfish gains. So we need to start demanding that the judiciary must rise up to the occasion and conclude these cases. In order to assess this issue of the public debt, I suggest that we need also to put up our heads together and perhaps file a composite suit, because the Constitution allows us to seek declaratory orders, to seek stay orders, to such an extent that we put to halt the payment of this debt to allow for a forensic audit so that we can really understand how did we get ourselves to this point.
Okay, so just on, you said it is possible to put a suit as as citizens. We can fundraise and fundraise and put a suit.
Absolutely, Eric. Under the Constitution, Article 23,
yes,
Kenyans can put up a petition and file it in the High Court and seek declaratory orders of any nature. Declaratory orders in the nature that this public debt has become a public problem and we need a forensic order, a forensic audit. Stay orders can be granted. And I have also heard Jimmy saying that there are lawyers who are doing pro bono cases in foreign jurisdictions. We have what we call, in law, we have something called extradition proceedings. We can get orders in our courts and register in those countries that concerns these fellows who have put up these debts against us for purposes of also getting stay orders from those countries. So this legal process is a very strong weapon that we can use at this particular moment. And I can tell you, we can get stay orders at this point. Remember, the issue of the public debt arises from the law of contract. And under the law of contract, we have several doctrines that can assist us in the circumstances. We have the doctrine of privity of contract, which provides clearly that if you are not part and parcel of a contract or a liability that is arising from a contract, then you are not liable to pay for it. In a country setup, before a government can borrow money, they need to get authority and consent from the citizens. Now, citizens give the authority to governments to borrow money through parliamentary approval. Just like in a situation of a company, before the directors and shareholders can act on behalf of a company, they must get authority from the company shareholders under seal. So similarly, even in a country, before a government can borrow, it must demonstrate that it got approval from the citizens. So we citizens can invoke the doctrine of privity to contract, and on that basis get stay orders to hold the payment of this public debt pending a forensic audit to ascertain exactly what happened. Of course, the other doctrine that will help us is the doctrine of ex tupi, whereby if an act arises from an illegality, there is no way if you are part and parcel of that illegality, you may want to benefit from it. So IMF, the Paris group, the London group, the Chinese, and the Eurobond, how it's being manipulated, cannot purport to benefit from this illegality if for sure it has been demonstrated that the manner in which these debts came to be is not according to what is contemplated in our laws. And almost as I conclude, the doctrine of estoppel can also come in and assist us in prosecuting this case. So as we think about the way forward, we need, of course, as citizens, to start asking questions about disclosure of the contracts that led to these debts. And through this forum, which we have demonstrated that is a very powerful forum, we can get this information. So all the professionals, or everyone that is in this forum that is concerned, needs to start doing their bit so that we can get this information. Let us start, probably, Eric, the next session we are having, let us also have a status update of the matters that we want to progress insofar as this debt is concerned. Let us try to come up with a number of professionals, lawyers, accountants, auditors, so that we start compiling materials for purposes of getting these court orders. So that is what we
Nzima kuchapa kazi jioni ikifika mtu. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
As I conclude on the issue of the status of the revolution, 2 minutes, 1 minute,
Yes.
Eric.
Yes.
As we continue championing on this issue of our revolution, we need to identify short-term and long-term goals. Short-term goals, as the president gears up towards appointing a new cabinet, we need to continue demanding that so many heads need to roll. We need to revamp our state corporations. We need to ensure that these people who are currently serving as state corporation heads, the CEOs, the board members, and the chairman, these people need to go. We need to have an overhaul. We need to start afresh. And as new people are brought into office, the first thing is we need to make public service, we need to decommercialize public service. We need to put up demands to the extent that if you're coming to serve members of the public, you should be paid according to your job group, based on your credentials. If you are an MP, if you are a cabinet secretary, If you are a CEO of a state corporation, if you are a chairman, if you are a board member, you should be paid your remuneration based on your job group. And job groups are defined by your level of education. That is the only way we are going to decommercialize public service. And as we demand demand dissolution of parliament, when new MPs will come in, we should also demand that they should be paid according to their level of education. Job groups. Let us have a scenario where if we have an MP who has not gone to university or doesn't have any certificate, you should be paid just like a janitor. So that you can, if you want more salary, you should be encouraged to go back to school. That is the only way we will be able to demotivate this thing, and slowly by slowly, we will get people who want to serve Kenyans. Thank you so much, Eric, and let's keep on engaging.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. As I hand over this chance to Jack, the young man called Chwani wants to tell us something. Can he tell us what he wants to tell us? Chwani? Chwani, can you start? Can you start, please? Chwani, can you start?
Hello.
Can you go on, Chwani? This is the last chance I'm giving you.
Hello, Nyakundi. Can I speak?
All right, consider that chance gone. Let me talk to Jack. Jack, you were saying something about fertilizer and the contaminated sugar and the cancer that we are going to experience in the next many years. What is this? Jack?
Experience in the next many. Yes, Eric, thank you so much.
Yeah, go on. I hope you've gotten your internet. We want to finish this very fast to give others an opportunity. You are talking about fertilizer and the contaminated sugar that Kenyans are taking. Kenyans, you are taking contaminated sugar. You are facing years and years of cancer.
That is true, Eric. Mithika Linturi brought in contaminated sugar, and it's like life is moving on as usual. We are having. Hello, can you hear me, Eric?
Yeah, go on, go on. Your internet is the problem, but go on.
We are going, very sorry we lost the people like Keuna. And in the near future, we are going to have a disaster because of the contaminated sugar that came in under Mithika Linturi and went to the market. And the president is laughing about it. Everything is normal. Life is going on in Kenya as usual. That one aside, we have a fertilizer scandal. A minister brings in fertilizer, and fertilizer that is not fertilizer, that is mixed with maram and cow dung. At the end of the day, the net effect is that the production, the food we are going to harvest this time, I was at home, you have a cob of maize that has hardly less than 10 maize tablets on it. It is a disaster. So when I realized this, I'm also a chairman of Public Investments Committee, Education and Governance. My work is to audit government, is to put government into proper checks and balances. I was so paid because I come from a farming region. Bomola is a farming region and largely Western Kenya. So when I prosecuted the removal of Mithika Linturi went
Hello, Cyprian. Are you able to get him?
I can't get him.
Can you hear me?
Eric,
Your internet is the problem, sir.
Eric, can I have 2 minutes?
Let him finish.
As I finish, Eric, Mythical Nduri must be prosecuted for the crimes he's had against the Kenyan people. And the
How are you
Kenyans
planning to do that, sir?
There is a case in court already by Law Society of Kenya, where we are enjoined, and it's coming up that he blatantly went against the constitution. Yes, we have a case. Kenyans have a case against him, and we must prosecute Mythical Nduri, and we must move it to the logical conclusion. As I support the Gen Z for what they have done up to now, I want to vehemently oppose an idea that is coming up of dialogue. An idea, you see, what the political wing has not achieved for so long because of mixed interests, this generation has done it in less than weeks. Yesterday, I was with Raila Amolo Odinga, my party leader in Azimio. I was with Kalonzo Musyoka and all the Azimio brigade, and I told them, don't interfere with these young people. Let them finish that which they started. We cannot dialogue with William Ruto when now we are getting bodies, young people, whose only problem and mistake was to go on streets and voice what.
Yes,
Eric?
yes. Go on. We still hear you.
Can I speak now?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to be very quick. Now, just to tell you why I was saying people like William Ruto cannot solve this problem, I want to express the illegality that has done over the last 1 year. In his first budget, the development budget in the appropriations bill said that they are going to borrow foreign and external loans of 313 billion shillings. 313 billion shillings. Those are the only loans that have been approved on the budget of Kenya. And those have gone to development as per our laws. They are even listed what they are going for. In the last 1 year, that ended June 30th, his first budget, he ended up borrowing 1.6.
We can hear you. Go on.
And I repeat, they are in a conspiracy of a Ponzi scheme. And I again repeat, KCB, Co Bank, and Equity Bank who are not involved in this malfeasance, and there are many others, get into those banks and deposit. These banks are part of our slavery and they must be cut off, completely cut off. And I want to say, in addition to this, that the only dialogue we should be talking about with William Samoei Ruto is a dialogue at the ballot box, no other. That is where we want to dialogue. And let me end with a famous quote I saw yesterday on James Smart's Twitter handle. And it was from a famous president from Burkina Faso called Thomas Sankara. He said, if we don't pay the debt, the lenders will not die. But if we pay it, we will die. That is the situation in Kenya. If we continue paying this, we will die. We must stop our death.
So before you go, Jimmy, now can you give us practical steps just tell us these are the practical steps that we need to embrace in order to avoid paying this odious debt. This is what we need to do. This is the next step. This is what we should do. This is what the citizen can do. And this is how we will stop the payment of this odious debt that we are not supposed to pay.
The only way, and I repeat, the only way, is to remove this regime from power. And any person who has been part of this malfeasance, especially over the last 12 or so years, must be removed from any decision-making position. That is the only way. The kind of money we are talking about is so humongous, so humongous. You are not going to sort it. And I appreciate the legal aspect that you can go to court, you can do this. I'm telling you, you're talking about phenomenal amounts of money. 50, 60 billion dollars that have been looted from us. And I'm telling you, they will buy nearly every institution. You must remove this regime from power. It must get out. It must have a conversation with us at the ballot box before 2027. It is the only way we are going to be able to do this. This is the only single way we are going to stop these bullets that are coming and killing our children. It must end. Our death must end. And it can only end with the perpetrators behind bars and them out of power.
All right. Before you, of course, you stay around so that you give us a parting shot. I'm looking for Nelson Amenya. He with the JKI hist. I've tried looking for him, send him a link. Oh, he's here. Nelson, go on and tell us about the JKI hist. What happened? Why was someone trying to lease or sell our airports? What was the reason? Why were they doing this? I'm sure you have the documents. You understand, because that is your area. You understand the nitty-gritties in that report and that proposal that you shared. Can you please tell us what happened?
Yes, thank you very much. We have had hitches and glitches here and there, but finally I'm here. So I just want to talk about this very shocking documents that I received, and they're being pushed from the highest offices, the ministry, State House, from KAA. So it's not as they can be able to trace them.
Nelson, are you still there?
Sorry. I think I was muted. So I was saying, if you go to the PPP Act, the way we are supposed to do projects, public projects, number one, you're supposed to do bidding. And then number two, you can do direct procurement. And then number three, you can do public, it's called PIP, privately initiated proposals. And wait 1 second, I opened this act. I have it here. Okay, this is the act. So for anyone who's interested, it's the PPP Act of 2021. And I'm going to read section 22. Okay, so section 22 talks about ensuring that there is public participation on any PPP project, which wasn't done by Murkomen and the KAA team. And then so Murkomen was trying to bypass all this, and he went directly to the PIP. But if you look at the PPP Act, it recommends the bidding process. It recommends bidding process over any other way of PPP. But they did not want it to go the bidding process. However, there was companies already willing to bid for this listing of JKIA. and companies from Singapore, companies from Qatar. But Murkomen and his people, together with Kositani, they went ahead and picked a company called Adani Group from India. Adani Group from India is one of the most corrupt companies from India. It is so corrupt that there was a company from the US, it's called Hindenburg Research. Hindenburg Research did a research on them, and the revelations were super shocking. If you read these things, I'm just going to read a few of them about Adani Group. So Gautam Adani is Gautam Adani is the owner of Adani Group. So Gautam Adani's brother-in-law, Samir Vora, was accused by the DRI of being a ringleader of the same diamond trading scam and of repeatedly making false statements to regulators. He was subsequently promoted to executive director of the critical Adani Australia division. Gautam Adani's elder brother, Vinod Adani, has been described by media as an elusive figure. He has regularly been found at the center of government's investigations in Adani for his alleged role in managing a network of offshore entities used to facilitate fraud. Our research, which included downloading and cataloging the entire Mauritius corporate registry, has uncovered that Vinod Adani, through several close associates, manages a vast labyrinth of offshore shell entities. We have identified 38 Mauritius shell entities controlled by Vinod Adani or close associates. We have identified entities that are also surreptitiously controlled by Vinod Adani in Cyprus, the UAE, Singapore, and several Caribbean islands. Many of the Vinod Adani associated entities have no obvious signs of operations, including no reported employees, no independent addresses or phone numbers, and no meaningful online presence. Despite this, they have collectively moved billions of dollars into Indian Adani publicly listed and private entities, often without required disclosure of the related party nature of the deals. Okay, let me go back up. The Adani Group has previously been the focus of 4 major government fraud investigations, which have allegedly money laundering, theft of taxpayer funds, and corruption, totaling an estimated US $17 billion. Adani family members allegedly cooperated to create offshore shell entities in tax haven jurisdictions like Mauritius, the UAE, and Caribbean islands, generating forged import-export documentation in an apparent effort to generate fake or illegitimate turnover to siphon money from the listed companies. Key listed Adani companies have also taken on substantial debt, including pledging shares of that. It goes on and on and on. They have over 300 corrupt cases, and at the moment, Adani Group is led by a man called Adani, and he's the third richest man in the world. He is second richest man in India. So corrupt is the man, and the companies that they have been named. They have a scandal called the short selling scandal, and it's the biggest corporate scandal in the world in history. So the reason why I'm reading all this is because this is the company that Murkomen saw fit to lease our JKIA for 30 good years. I was reading the proposal, the PIP proposal, and the reason why, they have to justify why they went with PIP, and yet in the PPP Act, there is 4 different ways you can procure, you can lease and do PPP partnerships. And the reason why they chose PIP is very lame. They say in this document that The reason they choose PIP is because if they do bidding, it will take 18 months. And in addition, after they have submitted the bidders, it will take an additional 4 to 6 months to go through and peruse through the bidding, the proposals, and then identify one person or one company to do this project and to list out JKIA for the next 30 years. So the reason behind PIP is very lame and does not qualify why they chose it. And then number two, they did not do public participation. It's hidden. Everything is shredded in secrecy. Everything is being done in hush tones, and no one knows anything about this deal up to today. And my sources say that in about a month, this deal is going to be inked, and it will become, as you know, in Tanzania, they are already operating their ports. So they are hoping that even in Kenya, they will quietly enter and sign the deal without Kenyans knowing what's happening to the most precious international airport, JKIA. And we know JKIA is one of the busiest airports in Africa. And to make it even worse, JKIA in their report does not make losses. It actually makes profit. And they have actually said that JKIA is they're underpricing their services. If you compare it with Addis Ababa is about 50 to 60% more expensive for carriers to run their operations in Addis Ababa, to land, all these landing fees. If you compare with JKIA, and they propose that they will double the prices in Kenya. If you double the prices of JKIA alone, last year they made about 13 million US dollars in terms of profit, and about 90 million US dollars in terms of revenues. So if you double, it means JKIA will be going towards 160 million in terms of revenues and about 26 million in terms of profits after you've deducted all the operations and everything. So this alone shows you that JKIA is not haijalemewa. It can still operate by itself, and we can still go on and do all these projects that we want to do, minus this very super corrupt company that Murkomen wants to impose on us without public participation and without a bidding process where other people who are more qualified and who are don't have integrity issues were ready to bid, but they were shortchanged by these corrupt people surrounding the deal, and they don't want people to know this. This is why we have to speak out about this. And then another point is that so they use an SPV model, which means that they will create a company in Kenya which will be running the operations, and then they went ahead and said they will create a consortium, a holding company, and a consortium means it's a few companies together, and a holding company means that their only work is to combine. So, like, for example, I used to work for a company that is a multinational. So, a multinational normally has a corporate head office, and the corporate head office is only a holding company that just consolidates the income only. There is nothing else they're doing. They don't do business, they don't run anything, they just consolidate their subsidiaries. So, they've created a holding company in UAE. UAE, as you've heard from the report, is a tax haven. This is how people evade tax. This is how people want to do the double Dutch sandwich. This is how people want to, like Murkomen, if they want to have shares in companies, they will take it to the tax haven. And then from there, you cannot trace this money. So we are asking, why are they doing this kind of corporate structure where they have to go through a tax haven like Dubai? Why can't they just operate as Adani from India directly to Kenya? And if you go through Dubai, it means that they are able to do something called transfer pricing. And this is how even European companies are stealing from Congo, from Botswana, from so many other different African countries. they steal from these countries through transfer pricing. So how it happens, if, for example, Adani says they have a patent, intellectual patent, or whatever patent they have, they will come and say that Adani is charging the Kenyan SPV for such and such a patent. So the income that we make as JKIA in Kenya will be deducted. You know the way EBITDA works, they will deduct the patent as a cost. So by the time it reaches where we have to deduct tax, they have already deducted fake costs in terms of transfer pricing. And this is why they are doing this thing of we have to have a company in the UAE and then another company and another company. And if it spans towards different jurisdictions, it's harder for us to track our money. And so this is, yes, Amerix.
Yes. I want to interrupt you a bit. Francis has been saying a lot about JKIA and how JKIA has been limping, but we can hear from here that there is profit. Francis, what is your comment on this? Because Nelson says JKIA makes a lot of, or KAA makes a lot of profit. I heard there, he said something like 13 million. Yet we are being told every time that it makes losses. Francis.
I think I was never about, I was mostly about Kenya Airways. I was mostly about the leases that were embarked on. In fact, the other day, somebody told me, I had a whistleblower telling me that there were two companies which were incorporated in the Cayman Islands and whatnot. One was, I think, called Kifaru, and another one called, I'll remember the names shortly. But they bought some Embraer. Embraer is an airplane brand from Brazil, and they all of them are denoted with the code name FF, which was Fast Family, which are owned by Uhuru Kenyatta. And so Kenya Airways was compelled to pay those outlandish leases on behalf of Kenya Airways to aeroplanes owned by the Kenyatta family, who those code names are denoted with FF, which was the Embraer model. And so when Ruto came in, don't forget that when we are talking about ODS debt, connect to Kenya Airways, because it's been one of the vessels which has been used to siphon taxpayers' money into private accounts. So when Ruto came in, when he was supposed to resolve those issues, then some of his cronies have gotten also other flights so that we can continue funding Kenya Airways from taxpayers' money. We can continue giving them money under the guise of bailing out. And we've given them, first of all, don't forget, when it was being privatized in the 90s, we were told that by privatization it will be self-sufficient, it will be profitable, and they came up with all these cock and bull stories just to sell the privatization agenda when I was talking about Philip Ndegwa and whatnot. But if you look at the amount of money we have spent post-privatization, it is close to 100 billion Kenya shillings. Now, that money, because, first of all, I was talking about somebody, the CEO at the time was Titus Naikuni. Titus Naikuni, first of all, he belongs to committee prison. I don't understand why Titus Naikuni, if we are giving the same treatment to Farah Malim, he goes to Sarova, and he's told he cannot stay there because of his toxic utterances, then Titus Naikuni should not be allowed to eat or drink anywhere, just like we want to do with David D because of his toxicity, defending war crimes. We should not be allowing these people to live amongst us. So Titus Naikuni, then came somebody called Bovin Gunze. Bovin Gunze was the one now, and now the chairmanship was Michael Joseph. Michael Joseph is a crook from South Africa. I don't know how he ended up here. I don't know how he was at one time the chairman of Safaricom and KQ and almost all the well-performing blue chip companies. But if you look, there is always a paper trail of corruption. Then Jeremy Mbuvin Gunze was the CEO of Kenya Airways when they were being bailed out with billions of shillings of our taxpayers' money to pay for for leases or for aircraft owned by the Kenyatta family. And his brother, you can't make this stuff up, I kid you not. His brother, called Jeremy Ngunze, was the CEO of CBA Kenya chapter. So here we have two brothers working for the same criminal outfit, which is called the Kenyatta Family Criminal Enterprise, siphoning taxpayers' money, because now CBA is also amongst other banks which have profited from anti-competitive practices. They have been involved in intellectual property theft. They have been involved also in the debt issue. They appear in the debt register of the banks. I know we have spoken about Equity Bank, we have spoken about KCB, we have spoken about Coop Bank as the lead banks which have funded and fueled the government's appetite for debt. If you go there, you just want a million shilling overdraft, they will make you jump through hoops so that you can just access an OD of just a million shillings. But they give government carte blanche. They give them billions of shillings every year under the guise of domestic debt, because it's, as you heard, it's a Ponzi scheme.
Yes.
James Mwangi has become a dollar billionaire in this republic from buying bonds, from domestic debt, mopping up capital from the commercial market. We cannot get credit. Our biggest weakness is lack of credit when we are doing enterprise, and it's because all the money is going to government, because they have seen it is lucrative to loan to government, and then they can be able to sort themselves out there with their own commissions and whatnot. So Kenya airports, whether it makes profit or not, first of all, don't forget that they terminated the Greenfield terminal, which was supposed to expand our capacity to make us a competitive hub in the region. Ethiopia has taken over us. First of all, they have more aircraft. In Kenya, we invested in these small planes called Embraer. Those Embraers, they are being taken to the key routes. They don't have good facilities, if it's the business class, if it's the first class. And so we are underwriting the delusions, and we are underwriting the poor financial decisions of Kenya Airways. Subsequent governments and individuals with a view, with an objective of securing our money. We have to convert whatever private assets that they have taken from our country. We have to secure them. They have to be returned to the state. They don't have to be grabbed by other people. They have to be grabbed. Everything, even the MPs who have stolen CDF money, we have to now repossess that so that it goes into the state, because these were crimes which were committed, and we have to catch up with time that they have stolen from us. Thank you very much, Amerix.
Thank you. All right, Nelson, that was just a kicker on what you were saying. Maybe you can tell us in a few minutes, 2 minutes or 3, before we give Mercy Tarus and the rest. I can see Soko analyst here and the others. What can we do as a nation? You know, we talk too much, but in your opinion, because you are the professional here, what can we do? The lawyers are here to guide us on the legal journey. They can tell us what to do, but what are you going to do? Or what do you propose we do as a nation to ensure that such kind of heist and the people behind it are put in jail?
Thank you, Amerix. Can I just finish the 3-4 points I had, and then I can talk about what we should do?
In the interest of time, you have 3 minutes.
Okay. So I just wanted to also say that in this deal and proposal, they're trying to propose the government to concessions, and one of the concessions they want is that they want to operate in Kenya tax-free. They haven't mentioned the number of years. They just say they want to operate without paying corporate income tax for some years. And also, I don't know if this is standard in deals, but they're saying